Hello and welcome. August. We are in the middle of this. And what I love about August is the fullness of the season. It is that month where we're not quite thinking about fall quite yet. It might be just on the horizon. We might have, a few more of those cool nights, where we wake up where it's a little bit crisp. But we're not quite tipping over into fall yet. And we're experiencing the fullness and the richness and the gifts of the season. And what I love about comparing the season of, or the season of summer in the month of August with grief tending, is that if we think about what it means to ripen and what it means to mature, we can then start talking about something that's very often not talked about in our culture, which is elderhood. And I love the saying that we are elders in the making. I just turned 50 this year, and something is different already. I've always kind of been an old soul because I went through so much loss early, early, early on in life. And so I learned a lot of these like mortality lessons when I was still a teenager. And because of that, I think that I'm a little bit different in some ways than somebody that is 50 years old and hasn't gone through a whole lot of loss, right? What I've learned so much through my own process of really diving into the grief journey and seeing it as a portal for initiation, this really deep process, the sacred work of grief changes us in ways that we could never imagine. And I have been changed in ways that would have never happened had I not gone through what I went through. And as I've mentioned in other areas, I don't believe that these, tragedies and traumas and things like that are gifts. I really don't. I don't subscribe to that. But I do believe that we are able to receive some of the gifts of having moved through the experience of grief and have come out the other side a little bit different person. And if we're very, very lucky, we can go through our whole life not avoiding pain and not avoiding losses because there's no such thing. Like to be human means that we will lose. We will lose everybody in our lives that we love. Everybody in our lives that we love will lose us. The cycles of birth and death and rebirth are constant. They're constant in our bodies, they're constant in nature, which we are a part of, and they are constant throughout our lifespan. So, if we're very fortunate, we can learn early on how to integrate and how to process the experiences that we've had in a way that allows us to move forward and grow from them and really even move through big transformations because of these experiences. And over the course of a lifetime, I feel like the way it's supposed to work is that we have good examples of elders in our communities that have done this work and have been given the privilege or the, kind of reward for it of wisdom and insight and love and compassion and deeper kindness because they know what it's like to lose everything. They know what it's like to have their whole life completely turned upside down by a big loss, a big experience and transition and change. So the idea here is that when we tap into the energies and the qualities of August and we think about ripening and maturing, that includes us. So we are ripening and we are maturing as we become elders in the making, or another term for it I've heard that I love is emerging elders. So I encourage you to think about your own grief journey. Think about who you are becoming or have been becoming over the course of your lifetime if you are one of these people like I am that have moved through many, many, many losses in their life. And so the idea here is that we can open our hearts to receive the gift of elderhood And what a beautiful thing it is that we can look forward to, you know? We can look forward to assuming a role that probably very few people in our lives have. I think about my parents, and I think they didn't really have great examples of elders in their communities. My grandparents were farmers and they came over from Norway, and it was solely focused, their livelihood was solely focused on working on farming and survival. They were in a very much of a survival mode. Now, my parents, were living a little bit better, right? But they were still very busy, they were still working, and they didn't have good examples of what it meant to really grieve big losses. So my parents both were kind of the mindset of you move forward, you keep going, you kind of, put it behind you. And I am choosing to do this a different way. I have really, since my parents died almost 3 years ago, both of them now, I chose a conscious path. I chose the path of intention when it came to tapping into the energies and cycles of nature to guide me through this process so that I don't become bitter, so that I do become a little bit more wise and do have a little bit more insight, so that I can offer something to my community. And that feels really, really good. I'm not saying that I've learned it all because I haven't. I've only got glimpses of what my own journey of elderhood will be like. And I feel like I've been on this path long enough to really recognize that there is something deeper here. And I think it's elderhood. Now, what do elders do in communities? Well, again, we don't have very good examples of them in our culture, but we can look to other cultures for guidance here. Oftentimes elders are the ones that really hold space for others, for younger people that are moving through experiences. They have a certain like earth element to them. They have this stability, they're very grounded. That's who I am becoming. That's who I want to become. And I want to be somebody that is in my older years eventually, and has something to offer to my community. And I hope that for all of us, those of us that are moving into elderhood like I am, and those that are younger that are just figuring out their way, but I really hope that we can start to change the attitudes and beliefs about elderhood because tell you what, I've been doing some research, I've been looking for quotes and poems and things like that, and there's not a whole lot out there. There's a lot to do with aging. There's a whole lot to do with anti-aging. Can you even imagine what culture would assert that there is such a thing as anti-aging? It breaks my heart. It really does because there's so much beauty and grace that can come with this later part of our lives. And I feel like if we just replace the word, aging with elderhood, there's just something more inviting about that. There's something deeper than that. And mostly it's about honoring this phase of life, not shoving people away when they've reached the point where they can have so much to offer to their communities. So, the gift of the season in August here is the gift of elderhood. And I encourage you to tap into your own experiences and see what you have learned. See what, if you can articulate, what's different about you as you have been on your own journey of becoming. And you've hopefully been able to catch glimpses of your future self and how that future self can benefit very directly, but also indirectly, benefit your communities, your family, your friends, your neighbors. There's a lot of exciting things ahead. So even though you have moved through something really difficult, that is necessary. And it is the grief journey itself, the process of integrating all of our experiences into our lives and coming through them and letting grief do her work on us, that we transform and we evolve and we grow into that elder, that wise elder that future generations can lean on. All right, here's to elderhood. I'm here with you. Bye bye.